Hi, everyone. Welcome to another live event with Guide and Grow. I am so excited here today to be talking about a really awesome topic, something that we don't really touch on a lot, fathers' roles in the home. And before I start, I did want to do a quick acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I'm from, the Darug people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and future as they hold the traditions, the memories, and the cultures of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in the nation of Australia. So, at the end of every month, we invite an expert guest to really discuss some work through some really important topics that have, a real impact on raising our future generations. Whether you're joining us from Australia, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we have people joining us from around the world. Let us know where you're listening in from. I know a few people have joined us already. Let us know where are you from. If you are joining us on LinkedIn for the first time, this is our second live stream across our platforms. We've got YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course, our Facebook group. So if you are interested in these live events that we tackle every month, they're free for all of our members, whether you're on our Guide and Grow Facebook page, if you're in our Montessori at Home Facebook group, or on our YouTube channel, Guide and Grow TV. If you can't catch the lives, don't worry. We record all of these sessions and we upload them to our YouTube channel, Guide and Grow TV. So if you do miss out, or if you are watching the replay, #replay, let us know where you're listening in from. And if you do have any other questions while you're listening to the live, you are more than welcome to put them in the comments wherever you are, YouTube, Facebook. That's the beauty of technology. We will get your questions live. Even if we aren't on the replay, we're happy to answer all of those questions. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our guest today, David Hargis from Child of the Redwoods. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Nice to have some space here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk
I'm going to
about
read a
fathers.
quick Yes, I'm going to read a quick bio for David, and then we'll get on to our discussion. So, David is one half of the genius behind Child of the Redwoods. If you don't know Child of the Redwoods, it is a Montessori homeschooling program, one of the best in the world. I'm a big advocate. We have a hello from New York as well. And he's worked as an educator in many different worlds, from public schools to national nonprofits to cutting edge startups as well. David is a product developer and technologist that focuses on business operations, product ideation, marketing, and design. He's also a father of two children that him and his wife, Aubrey, have homeschooled. And I know we're going to have an awesome discussion about all of that today. So
That's me.
before we dive in, David, tell me, how did you give us a little bit of your background? So tell everyone, a little bit about your background. How did you get involved
Yeah.
in Montessori as well?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I was not originally all that aware of Montessori. I'm an educator by background, but it was actually through Aubrey, who is a diehard, lifelong Montessori genius. She's the guru, right, when it comes to the Montessori stuff. And so we met in college. We worked at a writing center together, teaching grammar, and just developed a friendship. And then, eventually fell in love, and the usual good stuff like that. And we were both wanting to go into education. I was a high school teacher. Eventually, she went into elementary school or primary school. She taught like kindergarten to fourth. I taught ninth and 10th graders here in the U.S. in Texas, where I'm from originally. And I was always into Dewey, things like that, constructivist approaches, transformation of education, trying to make it better for everyone. I thought it's just such a backbone of our democracy, a backbone of our society is a good educational system.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Aubrey shared that, but she brought a perspective that I really didn't have. And that was Montessori, because her mother was a Montessori teacher for many, many years. She had Aubrey herself had gone to a Montessori school and was very dedicated to it. And so, through that relationship, I began to really kind of understand what was really powerful about Montessori and how much in common she had, and in fact was a pioneer before in a lot of ways. A lot of the folks that I really thought about and idealized as in terms of educational geniuses, people who were really transforming what education could be 100 years. And of course, was very indignant and frustrated that even here we are, many decades later. Why can't we be? Why couldn't we be actually implementing this stuff? And for a Montessorian, the question is the same: like, what's going on here? And we've known for so long how to teach people. We've studied it. We have a whole field of pedagogy and educational theory. We study it like a science, and
Mm,
yet we can't seem to, why can't we make this thing happen for the people? And so it's kind of that same frustration. And what I liked about Montessori that's different from, like, say, John Dewey and the democratic school process or things like that, or just more broadly a constructivist kind of open project-based learning type approach, is that it is so deeply rooted in the child development
yeah.
from the very earliest age
Yeah.
all the way through, and really looking at how, as a human develops and goes through these different stages of life, that
Mm,
that child's mind becomes more open and aware of certain things, and that we can then use our understanding knowledge of that to create environments that are perfectly suited to reach them. And
yeah.
when you make all this thing work together, it's just super powerful.
Yeah.
So my
Absolutely.
background with with Montessori is like almost all good things in my life. It's as a result of my wife. That's great.
So you're going to give Aubrey all the credit. Well, that's great. We love that.
Absolutely.
And David, tell us about your family. So, a little bit of background about your children, how old they are, so that
Yeah.
everyone listening can understand a little bit more about your journey as a father.
Sure. Well, they're on the they're on the other side of they're on the tail end of childhood at this point. My oldest is 16. My second, I have two boys, and 16 and 13. We've been homeschooling since day one. So as soon as our earliest was born, we sort of like, we're gonna make home education a part of it. We didn't actually set out intending to homeschool um, at first. We just really wanted to make sure they had a really great education, a Montessori
Yeah.
education. And through a variety of life circumstances, it just turned out that doing a Montessori at home approach was the best fit for our family. It really just, part of it was work. We wound up moving uh, from Texas to Washington, D.C., and then out here to San Francisco, California, where we live now. And so that kind of all that change and movement
Yeah.
while the kids were very young, just the instability of trying to pull them in or out of schools. And we had the ability to uh, do it a different way. And I think also, going back to the earlier question about Montessori, like there are some good public Montessori programs, but in the U.S. at least, they tend to be very expensive, and they tend to be
Mm,
focused on very little. Even though the
mm,
Montessori curriculum goes all the way through, it's
yeah.
very rare to find anything after really preschool. You might find lower L, but it gets very, very rare. Like, there are some, we've
Mm,
been able to tour a few that have middle and upper high school secondary education programs, but they're just unusual. And so, because we really wanted to use this methodology, because we were public school teachers for many years before we made changes, career changes and so forth, we just kind of had an awareness of what we could do at home. And so that's how it kind of fell into it. And so the boys, they're teens now, and are especially my oldest is he's looking at college pretty soon, so he's fully into high school but still homeschooled, and it looks different than it did when they were 3, of course, or 7.
yeah.
But it's still really centered on that, following the child, letting the child have a choice and control of the process, but within sort of our knowledge of where they need to land in certain ways. And so we're trying to keep that spirit going as we continue through.
Of course. And those type of things, like you said, we have the same issues here in Australia when you're talking about access to Montessori primary or high schools. So we call lower L primary here. And
Mhm.
we have a couple of adolescent programs now, and we're seeing a slight growth in that area, which is really exciting because it is really hard and to find and access those type of schools. So, being
Yeah.
able to do that in a home environment and having you guys as a guide is really something unusual, but it's so great. It's amazing, and I'm sure that your
Yeah.
kids have benefited greatly from that. And so, David, how let's talk about a bit about your parenting. So,
Yeah.
firstly, with the homeschooling journey, that's a huge topic in itself. But when it comes to like your role as a father and parenting, as well as doing that, a lot of people have these misconceptions around parenting, and it was so different. You were saying
Mhm.
right now about how, that homeschooling was so different when your children were 3 or
Mm.
13. How do you think, how has your kind of view on being a father changed or evolved since your children were young and to what it is now?
Well, I'm a lot more tired now. But
So the
I think
tiredness
that's
never
age. I
stopped.
don't think that's
Okay.
I think that's my age, not theirs. How does it change? Well, and we say teenagehood is the second toddlerhood, and it's true.
Yeah.
So everything old is new again in a way.
Okay.
I think that kind of the short answer is that in some ways it really is. And this won't be a short answer. In some ways, it is different because my oldest now is taking algebra 2, and he's doing it online because that's how he likes to learn, and it fits into it. And so he's not in a way where in a prior stage of life he was at home, we were using beads and things like that. He's at a point now where he is doing more of an independent study and independent journey, but that's appropriate to his age.
Mm,
So that is different. But at the same time, a lot of what makes being a Montessori dad or a homeschooling dad or a homeschooling parent in general the same is the same. And that is, you really have to have a mindset about how your life is going to orient around it. It is a somewhat unusual journey. There are several million homeschooling families here in the US. It's much more popular than it was a few years ago, but it's still not the norm. Most kids go to public school or they go to private school, and that's fits in fine for what most people want, or how most people are expected to sort of organize their life. You get up in the morning, you go to the office. I did this for many, many years. You get up, you go to the office, you come home, the kids are at school during that same period of time. Maybe you're trying to arrange to either your partner or your spouse or whomever is going to go pick them up, or if you have help, or
mm,
extended family or whatever. You're trying to get all of that worked out. And when you're homeschool, it's not that there is less of that. You just are in a position to reorient um, your life so that you can start to think differently about where does your time go, how do you want to prioritize, how much time do you really expect your kids to be studying, doing school versus doing independent study versus doing social time. And that what that looks like changes as they get older, and how much involvement you have changes as you get older, but the concept stays the same. So in some sense, what you really are doing as a Montessori homeschool parent is you're really kind of taking the typical life journey and say, I want to do it in a different way. And the way I
mm,
want to do it is really family centric.
yeah.
I want to think about how the family, how we as a family function and exist, what's best for the kids, what we can do together, how we can be fulfilled as humans, as adults, in ways that look different, than maybe the traditional path. But by making these choices, you really can unlock something very different. And that doesn't necessarily change whether they're, a baby or 3 or 16. It's kind of a mindset. The mindset is challenging to get into. I think I'm
Mhm.
sure we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's kind of the key. Once you're willing to sort of make that switch, then it kind of starts to flow. It's not easy, but it flows.
Yeah. And so how would you describe your relationship with your children?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we have a, um, I mean, I think we have a good relationship. It's hard to say, you know what,
Mm.
when you're 16, as I was as a 16-year-old boy, a teen. I'm seeing it reflected back to my mother used to, when she would get very angry with me many years ago, she would say, "You're going to have somebody just like you. Ah, punishment, punishment." And I'd say, "Oh, yeah, well, ha, I hope I do." Well, I got
Yeah.
one. And what that means is he doesn't really ever talk very much.
Yeah.
He'll give you
Typical
like kind
teen.
of
Yeah.
typical
Yeah.
teen, like
Yeah.
nonverbal kind of responses. You're not really sure what's going on. And it can be very, very frustrating. Aubrey and I were talking about how the teenage years for parents is the age of patience, just like it
Yeah.
is when they're
Just
little.
like it is. Yeah.
Exactly. So um, that is. That is, I think, probably the cornerstone of the relationship at this stage for my
Yeah.
older is it's really a lot about patience and saying he's
Space. Yeah.
okay. You did
Yeah.
what you had to do. He's
Yeah.
knows he has a good moral compass, ethical compass. He's got his head on straight. He's
Yeah.
going to go off and make his mistakes, but he's a really good kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, he doesn't talk, but he obviously loves and trusts the family and
Yeah.
is relying on the relationship. And
Yeah.
when you give him the hug, he can't help himself but hug you back, even though he's too cool for school. For my for my younger, who's 13 now, or is just about to turn 13. He's actually quite the opposite. He's a very vocal, open,
Mm.
emotionally expressive, emotionally intuitive uh, person, and you know exactly what he's thinking at all time, which is great because there's no guessing game. It's also really tiring at times because it's like TMI. There's a bit of TMI, too much information, especially as they get older and older, and they have a lot of questions. And so, for about how the world works in certain ways, and so you have to again, but though in that same sense of like patience to answer questions over and over again. Sometimes those are questions about things like the bird and the bees. A lot of times they're just questions about what should we do about this particularly thorny ethical issue. We live in San Francisco. There you see there's just a tragic amount of human suffering in our city
Mm.
that you're sort of around, and it's a hard question. Like, well, how do we solve that? What do we do? How do we get
Yeah.
involved? What can one person do? What's the right choice? And him going through this process of coming of age in that and sort of experiencing and thinking about it just as one example,
Yeah.
and then wanting to talk about it a lot. And I don't have the answers. No one really knows for sure what to do. Honestly, we all have
Yeah.
ideas, but it's a very, very, very thorny question, political question, ethical question, etc. And you have to be willing to answer and talk about that over and over and over. You have to have patience. So I think for me, that would be my one word answer is patience, to try and have a
Yeah.
relationship built on patience. And of course, rooted within that patience is unending love. It doesn't mean that I am always patient or that I always feel like I'm leading with love, but it is the goal, right? To lead
Yeah,
with
absolutely. Working
patience.
towards. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Go
I
ahead.
think I think, David, you nailed it because, regardless of what age or stage your child is at, that is really what underpins, parenting when we think about it. It is patience, it is love.
Hmm.
And, and having that time to actually be there for your children and talk about or even facilitate these type of questions, or the fact that they feel comfortable to come into you and ask those questions, is a really great thing. And yes, it does depend on
Totally.
personality, but it also does depend on the fact that you've created that openness and willingness in your space to be able to
Yep.
then, have that room for these types of questions. And I think that comes back to the importance of having not just, mother-like figures or mothers, but also
Hmm.
father-like figures and fathers, which is really important to children's development, because I feel like
Totally.
they bring a different dynamic to the space. So
Absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about that. What would you see is kind of the difference or the role of fathers, in comparative to mothers in your experience?
Yeah. I think this is I love this question because it's very, very hard.
Yeah, it is.
And there's not a right answer, because my sense is that in the past, generations prior, you had very firm, socially
Mm,
prescribed answers. The father is the breadwinner, and the mother is this, and the home care, takes care of the
yeah.
home. Sort of a lot of this, they grew out of the sort of the Victorian ideology, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Uh, we are working, I think, many in society, at least, in the US and Australia and other places, are working to sort of upend that and say, we don't really want to make our world structured in a way like, strong, breadwinning dad and little, uh, the little wife at home who
Nurturing, yeah.
angel on the hearth, 19th century nonsense. We don't like that anymore. We know that it's not a relationship, certainly not the relationship I would want to have with Aubrey. I mean, I want a partnership and a friendship, and someone to be with, a human, an equal, and not any other relationship would be disgusting. It would just like, it wouldn't be interesting to me. Um, so it's very, in some sense, it's important to like lay out at the top, like those old roles for the good reason. And I'm in full support of like, let's get rid of the stereotypes. That said, I am also, maybe unpopular opinion, I do think it's very, very important for children to see the dynamic between adults, two adults, or more. I think an extended, when you have even like an extended family of grandma and auntie and
Mm,
uncle and so forth nearby, or even in your home, I think it's important for children to see how different people, regardless of whether it's the mom or the dad or whatever, how they work out problems together and how they interact with you, the child. And when
mm,
you have a problem, like, what do we do about this thing about homelessness? Or I said I wanted to eat that chocolate, but they said no, or whatever it is, like, or
yeah.
you name it, like it's time for bed. And how do you handle bedtime routines, or anything like that? It's important to show how different humans will interact with you as the child, for you to figure out what that looks like, and for you to then have modeled to you a conflict resolution approach. That even though Aubrey and I will not always see eye to eye, obviously it's human nature. We're not always going to see eye to eye on how to do certain things, or certain parenting decisions, or even certain business decisions that we might, talk about, as we, are co-owners of Child of the Redwoods together. We're making business decisions, or we're making other household decisions, budget decisions, who's cooking, like how did this house get so messy, et cetera, et cetera. Normal life kind of stuff. It's important for the children to see that they people can come, they can be really heated sometimes, like they can even get sort of like, oh man, I'm gonna go over here and pout, kind of heated, kind of like, I'll talk to you later, I'm too angry,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And then work through it and say, I'm sorry, or I was out of line, or
Mm,
I wasn't listening, or let's figure this out. And what we've been doing for a long time, and I think in a way the boys they hate it in some sense, because they're like, oh no, is that we're really, really intentional. Even when Aubrey and I will disagree, let's say we'll get like, it's your turn to clean or whatever. And maybe then we'll kind of have a tiff of some sort. We want to bring then the kids back in, and we'll say, here's what we're talking about. And the reality is that we're not really fighting about who's supposed to pick up the kitchen. What we're really fighting about is that I haven't been getting any sleep, and I don't feel very good. And then I took
yeah.
out my frustration, et cetera, et cetera. And we're trying to, the modeling of the conflict resolution, because you then want the child to be
Mm,
able to go forward in the world and do the same with, to have empathy, to lead with compassion and empathy, not to the point where they're not willing to stand up for themselves. We don't want to create kids who are weak. I mean, that's not the goal at all. We want people to be strong, firm, happy individuals with their own individual dreams and aspirations, and the ability and um, the confidence to go and chase that,
yeah.
but in a way that is respectful of the broader world. And so, to the point of why you would want a two family home or a multi adult home, the answer would be that, for me, a big part of it is that it is the cradle, no pun intended, of where we teach children how to treat each other with respect. If you see, and this to the inverse,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in a relationship where the your mother is constantly being browbeaten by your father, or your father is making snide comments about your mother behind her back, or vice versa, that stuff
Mm-hmm.
sinks into the child's brain and it becomes a model for what they think gender roles and the appropriate way to treat people is. And so it has to pervade. But so you need to know that this is what you're doing. It's a big part of what you're doing. And then you have to be really intentional. And even though it can be really hard and tiring, and sometimes you have to swallow your ego and pride, that's part of life as well. And but it's so important. Like the child is learning, they're a sponge. Everything that you do is teaching them
Mm.
all the time. And we want to teach them good stuff. So it's not to say that you couldn't do it if you didn't have a power dynamic differential somehow in your home, like male, female, or, mom and dad or whatever, single parent home or so forth. But I think that having the mom and dad role really helps, and specifically the mom and dad, because, the way that men and women interact in the broader world is no small thing. And I think, again, how we teach our children through our behavior in our home is how we make it a much more equal world. If we want to create a world where men and women really can have equality, can be
Mm.
considered as friends and partners and true
Yeah.
in a true way, then it has to start at the home. How do we, in
Yeah, of
our subtle
course.
and unsubtle ways, show how we
Mm.
treat people that are different?
Mm, mm. Yeah, look, David, I really admire that, and I hear that because when you were talking about, like, letting go of your ego a little bit, I know that traditionally it might not come naturally to some people, and I want to understand from you or from your experience, what if people that are listening out there might not have a partner that is that kind of open to acknowledging and understanding their feelings, working through resolution, having open communication, because those things don't tend to come naturally for men. I think it's something that
Totally.
might it's I mean it's that's a generalization and I don't want to, but like, generally speaking, you know with I know that a lot of people that are listening to this will think, oh well, great, I wish I could have those conversations. So I guess, what tips
Totally.
or what would you say to people that are listening out there? How can they then kind of encourage that type of open communication, or even just to change that idea slightly from that traditional role, or to get their partners more involved, or to kind of have those
Yeah.
conversations at the very least?
That's a really an awesome question, and I can only tell you how it worked for me, because
Yeah.
I'm from a rural community in Texas. I grew up in a home with much more classic gender role concepts. My mother was always sort of the one who, again, this is sort of a weird expression, where's the pants. My father was actually the more passive of the two, but there was a lot of like grumbling and riot, sort of in it behind the scenes, and then it gave me a real kind of perspective on, like, oh, okay, I guess you just gotta, that's how you treat people or something. And but they're human beings, and so so the kind of the lesson I learned was in some sense a flawed lesson, in the same way that I am a deeply flawed person as well. And the way that the journey worked for me was, at some level, just looking at it and saying, like, that's not exactly the way I want to be, or I understand that there's a different way of living,
Mm.
or I have I understand that I would like to change this about myself, and then enlisting, in this case, my Aubrey, and saying, help me to be better about these things, and holding yourself accountable, and then being brave enough to
Yeah.
have a trusted partner. Again, this is where your spouse is really can be really, really helpful, important. Having the trust, faith, confidence, love in that relationship to say, help me to make better choices, to hold myself accountable. It has to start
Yeah.
with you making that commitment. And then it might involve things like therapy. I mean, it could involve unlearning certain behaviors by joining certain kind of support groups, online support groups, in-person support groups, uh, joining a men's group through your church if you go to church, or whatever you're uh, joining some other sort of so something that kind of is giving you a model for how to live that is aligned with what you want to be, your aspiration versus what you are. So I guess at the very root, you have to start by a willingness to say, like, I think I can do better. And then you have to then
Yeah.
take that seed of I can do better to say, I'm going to do the hard work to do it. And then you have to then enlist the resources. And, I would say therapy is not a bad choice if you've got a lot of lessons to unlearn.
Yeah.
And I would say peer groups, having friends and in peer groups that are kind of helping you keep accountable. I think the kind of media you consume, if you're watching media that is degrading, then or or in other ways reinforcing the thing that you're
Mm.
trying to break.
Unlearn. Mm.
You've got to kind of be careful with that. It's like a diet in a sense. You're in some sense like you want to change the way you are. You have to do the work. So, unfortunately, I wish I could say, well, for the partner who wants to start homeschooling and their reluctant husband or whatever is like, no way, I'm not going to do it. All they have to do is say these magic words. It doesn't really
If
work.
only it was that easy.
If only it was that easy.
Half
But,
of the marriage issues would be solved.
I know, right? Snap. But if if you have a marriage that is built on some level, at some level, on mutual love and respect,
Yeah.
then the partner should be willing. I mean, if they're not, then this is a whole nother ball of wax, but willing to at least entertain, like, what is this all about?
Mm.
And then you can start to articulate why you want to do things a certain way. So to be more practical, like, why might you want to start using a Montessori homeschool
Mm.
experience versus putting their kids into public school or even private school? Like, what are your reasons? What are their concerns? What's blocking them? Are they reasonable? Are they
Mm.
worried about socialization? Are they worried about academic outcomes? Are they worried about finances? Are they what are, there are very, very there are many, many many legitimate reasons that a person might be very skeptical.
Mm.
How do you answer those questions in a way that doesn't belittle the other person's perspective? Because if they're not quite ready to say, like, "Oh, I'm going to try and work this all out," or even if they are, nobody likes it thrown back at their face. Like, they're
No.
trying, and so going to them and saying, "Oh yeah, I understand that. I was thinking this
Yeah.
too, but here's what I found." And
Yes.
then getting to a point where you could maybe have a compromise, like, maybe you could try and do this on the weekends, or maybe we could try and do it over the summer while the kids aren't in school,
Mm.
or maybe we could go to a homeschool play date and you could meet some of the other moms and dads there and you could kind of see they're actually not all weirdos or whatever, like, whatever your concern is, like, and you could actually talk to other people, and
Yeah.
then that might open a thought in that person's mind, like, that
Mm.
is interesting, I like that, that is a way I'd like to be. What's preventing me from getting there? And then you can begin sort of a process of growth, and it takes a long time. It's an in fact, it takes till the day you don't live anymore. It's like you're a work in progress forever. I certainly
Yeah.
am. And yeah, for all my, like, this is the way it's all good, and I'm wearing my cozy sweater. The fact is, like, it's still times when you get very frustrated, and there's times when you get really like,
Yeah.
why can't this be easier? And like, there's, like,
That's the
just
whole journey of
just do what I
parenting.
said.
Yeah, but that's the journey of parenting, right? And
Totally,
actually being reflective and having that ability to reparent and break these cycles. I mean, I'm happy to see that there is more about this on social media. Like, we have some
totally.
great, fathers and dads that are out there, or anyone, even women that are out there breaking cycles and talking about this stuff, because it was never anything that anyone spoke about, like the way we were
Hmm.
raised. It was very much, you either listen or, like,
That's right.
forget it.
Seen,
It's
not
just,
heard, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's just, and you just shush and you do as as you were told to do, and that's it. And so actually being able to reflect on that and reparent and break these cycles, I think is one of the key things when we talk about this topic in today's society. We can't parent and do things how it was back then, because it just
That's
doesn't
right.
fit into, the world that we live in today and the society that we live in today. So I think that
That's
was
right.
such a great point that you brought up. And finding those support systems and understanding where they are for you, and opening that communication. So when you said, what are the reservations, or trying to understand from your partner, what are the blockages, what is it about, what are their hesitations, and then say, instead of saying, oh well, this is how we should do it, really
Mhm.
just presenting them, oh, this is what I found, like, what are your thoughts on that, what do you think about it, to
Mhm.
kind of get them to start thinking about it. I think that was a really great tip, for everyone that was listening out there. And if you guys do have a specific question for David, please feel free, put him on the spot. This is your chance. Do it now. Let's talk about all those questions that you might want to ask. But yeah, David, did you have any other comments on that before I move on?
No, I mean, it's just absolutely.
Yeah. So what would be one of the biggest things that I guess you and Aubrey do to support each other in parenting? So, we did speak about some of those things where, you're having those communication or conflict resolution. Is there anything else that you can think of, like from right at the beginning, that you guys did throughout your parenting to make it a little bit easier? Because we all know how difficult it is to be on this journey, whether you're a parent, you're a step parent, you're a father figure, mother figure, whatever it is. It's not an easy journey. And how do you guys find it to support each other? What do you do?
Yeah. So I think you have to remember. So it gets very easy to think of your partner in the mommy or daddy role, because it can become so dominant. And I think we also are very tired, and we feel put upon
Mm,
because we are. Children require an immense amount of emotional and physical effort and labor, labor of love, but still a lot. It's so I think for us, it's been important to remember that the other person is an individual with individual needs and desires and interests, and needs their own space, and needs to be able to have their own hobbies, and have time to explore those, and can't be put in a position where that person is doing all the labor,
mm,
and that it has to be equitable. And then when we feel put upon one way or the other, either as the person who feels exploited, or as the person who it feels like you're overdoing it, you're the exploiter, then you have to be able to go and talk and say, you know what, I feel guilty about going to my bowling club, whatever,
mm,
and or playing golf or whatever it is, and or are you okay with that, or how can we make sure that it's equal, or
yeah.
the vice versa. If the person says you're gone too often, I can't, you're always at the um, golf club or whatever, so I'll give you a real world example. So Aubrey has picked up a hobby for pottery. She really finds it really uh, enjoyable. I think it's an awesome hobby. She heads to the pottery studio that's down the street, and she'll spend several hours there. And it's just a lot of work, right? She's really learning a new craft. She's working on the technique. It takes hours and hours of work. You have to get all the materials out, then you have to clean it all up. And I'm really, really happy that she has connected with something. I'm like, great, this will make you happier, which will make you a more effective parent and a more effective partner and just a happier human being on the earth. And like, that's awesome. At the same time, there are definitely times when I'll be sitting and I'll be working and I'll be like, where's she at? She's at the pottery studio. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's she going on there? Why can't she come home? She should be working with me. Why do I have to do this? So you get that, like, you can feel that negativity or whatever coming in. It's important not to bottle that up. You have to like think through it for
Yeah.
yourself, and then you got to talk through it. And as the partner, you have to be willing to like listen and know, like, I'm not telling you I don't want you to go. I'm just telling you, like, there's something inside me that's
Yeah.
getting it's frustrated. How do we want to like resolve that before it becomes an issue?
Mm.
So to extend that to homeschooling, when I before I started working on full time here at Charlotte Redwoods a couple of years ago during the pandemic, actually, for years and years, I worked in corporate world and was gone a lot. I traveled a lot. I traveled internationally. It was worked in tech, so late nights, very time consuming life. And Aubrey was in a position to do a lot of the primary parenting and homeschooling Monday
Mm.
to Friday. But the converse was that I was really very protective of my weekends as much as I could, and was trying to do as much of the schooling and care as I could on the weekend in order to give her not only a break, but because I wanted to be involved with the kids' lives. And so
Yeah.
it was in a meaningful way. And so it was a way of like coming to a compromise. It's working it out between us, and some of it was like implicit, and some of it was just based on the reality of like these are my work hours, and some of it was negotiation. And so whether it's something like making sure that your partner has time for a hobby and to explore her
Mm.
own self so that she's a happier human being, or it's something more like I have these work hours, I don't have any choice about it, or if I do, there's consequences, and we have to decide if those consequences are worth it to the family, like
Awesome.
the financial
Mm-mm.
consequences or whatever.
Mm.
Then what's important is you talk through that and kind of make sure that the other person sort of knows where your head's at, how you're feeling, both when you're frustrated or when you feel guilty, and vice versa, and keep those lines of communication open.
Mm.
Otherwise, it festers and it's going to come out in the least opportune time. Like,
Yeah,
why didn't you
absolutely.
wash the dishes?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, or that why don't you wash the dishes, or why do you always leave your things lying around? That
Totally,
always has an underlying that's not the issue here. So if you ever hear your
totally.
partner say that, everyone that's
That's right.
listening, that's not the real issue. There's something else bubbling up
Exactly.
underneath there.
That's right. And it's
Laura,
not even really, yeah,
mm,
absolutely. It's not even really about, like in the case of my example of the pottery studio, it's not even really about the pottery. It's just about the feeling of inequity or
yeah,
imbalance or something. And, it's, you just kind of looking into yourself and saying like, okay, there's something else. And then, kind of, we talked earlier about doing that hard work of digging
yeah,
deeper. You talked about it as like a reparenting yourself in a sense, right? So like
yeah,
doing the hard work to sort of say, okay, what's really eating it? Like, what am I really frustrated about? You
yeah.
know, uh, why does this annoy me? And um, if you have a good relationship with your, husband or wife, then they're the right person to talk to about those things because they're intimately involved in the decision.
Yeah. Definitely. Laura had a great question. She asked, "Are there any book recommendations for men working through unlearning those dynamics?" I think that is a brilliant question. And
It
David,
is.
do you have any recommendations?
I don't actually.
Okay.
I'm
If
sorry.
no, that's okay.
I'm trying to
Laura, if
think.
no, we will we'll do some research on that actually. And what we'll do is we'll upload some things that we find. We'll put it on our we've got lots of parenting book recommendations on our Amazon store. So I think that's a wonderful question. And we definitely need to find some books out there that will really help with
Totally.
that. Yeah.
I know
Um
that years ago, I mean, it's so probably passe and old at this point, but early on, I read a lot of like Alfie Cohen and things like
oh
that,
yeah,
Understanding
he's
the Wars. And
brilliant.
yeah, so those were real formative back in the 90s and turn of the 2000s for me in terms of thinking about teaching specifically, but also just in general about how we interact with our children and each other.
Mm.
And, thinking about motivations and what happens. So I kind of drawing lessons from that for me, but that's a great question. I'll have to think about it.
Yeah. So we have another question from Caroline. She says, "My husband works long hours. He's tired and stressed when he gets home. Due to
Mm.
this, there isn't a lot of time, and she wants every waking moment with daddy when she can. How can we help her understand and get the time that she needs? She's 4 years old."
Mm, that's tough.
Yeah.
Um,
And that would be the situation for a lot of people as well.
totally.
It is really hard at the moment.
So I can only answer it from my perspective as I was the one who was working the long hours and coming home
Mm.
tired. I think we want to ask Aubrey how she handled it with the boys. For me, it was really just like looking at myself and saying, this is my responsibility. These are my children. That's the most important thing that I'm going to do is parent them. They're only going to be for no more than 365 days. They're going to grow out of this phase very soon. And if I don't take advantage of this, then it'll be lost. And
Mm,
so part of it was just within myself, a desire to push through. Now, it's not always realistic. Sometimes you're just really tired. And so for those instances, it was trying to come up with something we could do together that was really easy. And it might be is something like watching something together. We didn't do a lot. We weren't like prohibitive against media, but we were cautious about if you do something together, it's better. So if you want to watch a Disney movie, for example, and it's age appropriate and you want to watch it together, that's not a bad way to spend some time. It's not like the most engaging quality time, right? But it's time together.
mm,
And don't try and put too many qualifiers on that experience, right? If the best you can do is lay, if he goes and takes a nap, maybe, and she is in the room with him, maybe she is playing while he's napping on the couch. Again, it's not like super high quality engagement time, but it is actually super high quality emotional time because you're together. And
mm,
what the child is saying is she misses her dad, right? She just wants to
yeah.
be around him and with him. And so, however you can give it to them, even if it's not, don't. If your issue is, well, it has to be something really, really like big. They have to be doing something. I would say, don't start with that. Start with the perspective of what can they do together. Like, are you going to read a story? Could you read a story while he's sitting in the chair, dozing, or just relaxing, or maybe he's half listening, or whatever? Like, you're together. You're going to do the best you can.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
would say
absolutely.
that's like I guess that in a word, it was like, do the best you can. Like
Yeah,
you're not going to
absolutely.
break them. You're not going
Yeah,
to break
that's
them.
right. Yeah, no, that's some great advice, and it's really realistic because, yeah, it has to be something practical. Like, you can't have these big
Totally.
expectations about, what, they're gonna do if especially if someone's feeling really tired and stressed. It's just
Totally.
not a fun time for anyone. So,
And
yeah.
sometimes the answer is daddy needs to take a nap. I mean,
Yeah. And then
sometimes the answer,
inviting the child over to be engaged in that activity is a great thing, because at the end of the day, they're still bonding and they're having that time together.
totally.
Um, and Caroline was saying, thanks, that helps because I like that. And it has to be quality time. Yes, absolutely. Mindset. It is all about the mindset.
It is. I want you to think. I don't mean we can all. I guess it's a dangerous game to say. Think back when you were a child. What do you? But when I think about my own relationship with my mom and dad,
Mhm.
of course, I have memories of important things, like big, elaborate things we did. But most of my memories of being with my parents, whom I
Mm,
love my parents, is just the small things, like
yes.
my father's laugh, or
Yeah.
I have a very, it's odd, but I have this really cherished memory of house cleaning. We would clean the house together every Thursday night, and I hated it. I hated cleaning the house. I still hate cleaning the house, but we did it as a family. It was what we did. We got home from school. Dad got home from work. My mother was a teacher, so she got home around the same time as my sister and I did. And then in the evening, we'd roll around. We'd turn on the sitcoms. It was the 80s, 90s, and so it was the classic era of sitcom TV. And we turned on the TV and we'd start vacuuming and cleaning the kitchen and dusting the rooms and kind of
Mm,
watching. And then we'd eat some kind of something simple like hot dogs for dinner, and because we were all tired from cleaning. And I hated, every kid hates cleaning, I'm sure, but I love that. I
unless you
know
have
now
a
that I'm a
toddler.
grown,
No,
yeah,
David,
looking
as
back, I'm
lo-
like,
unless
this is the
you
memory I love the most. Like, what was that memory about? It was like, that's a memory of being a family together,
yeah.
doing something together. And just even thinking about it now really takes me back and is like, yeah, that's what matters. So I
Yeah.
think we can set, and I think for men, this is, when we talk about the breadwinner, that's a toxic idea we as men have to get rid of. Like, what does it mean to be the breadwinner? Like, to go out and make all the money, or to always be tough and like, I'm too, like, I'm not tired. I don't need a nap. I can play horsey all day, with you, or make mud pies or whatever it is. Like, you can't. but that's actually not the metric that you're measuring yourself by. It's not the
Mm,
quality of life is not measured in the amount of money you spend or the complexity of the task. Sometimes the most mundane, simple things can be the most endearing. Having your
yeah.
daughter take her blanket to the napping daddy and her snuggie, or her cubby or whatever, can be a thing that is actually really meaningful to her because now she sort of is engaged with what's happening. And, that can be enough.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Thanks, David. We have
Yeah.
another question. Oh, yes. Manongo was saying on LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn questions because this is only our second live stream to LinkedIn. So, yes,
LinkedIn.
bring
All
it
right.
on, anyone that's listening. Thanks for the initiative. Hope we have access to the recorded video of this session. I missed the beginning of the session due to country time difference. Now, the best thing about these lives that we do, all of these videos are streamed, but they are recorded and we will put them up on our YouTube channel. So it's www.youtube.com/guide and grow TV. So we'll pop that link down in the LinkedIn for you in the session. So all of these sessions, especially this one with David, it's been such an incredible discussion. All partners, fathers, father figures, everyone out there that's listening, even to all the mother figures out there and mothers, that everyone should be really listening to this because it's got some really great gems in this discussion, not only about Montessori, homeschooling, parenting, reparenting. We've literally covered so many topics. David, do you have any final remarks before we wrap up the session?
No, I just want to again to encourage people to hit delete and if they have habits, expectations of for themselves that are just not uh, really right. And I think in our heart, we often know when we're not kind of hitting the mark. And then we sort of fight that because we have an expectation of like what we're supposed to be. But if we really dig deep and look and say, like, what actually is important about my life, and then if we can take a minute to try and do that, I think it can really help us as parents and as partners to, husbands, or wives or partners or family members, just human beings so much. So um, focus on things that are true.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David, once again for joining us here. If people want to find you guys, where can they find you? Let us know. Let everyone know that's listening out there where they can find your work, because I know we always promote the Child of the Redwoods homeschooling courses. So this is your time to do that.
Yeah.
We'll also pop all the links into the live so everyone can know where to find you as well.
Well, if you are interested in Montessori homeschooling, we would love to give you some more information. We're at childoftheredwoods.com. That's our online home. And if you're not familiar with us, just in a nutshell, we are homeschooling educators who wanted to homeschool in a Montessori way our own kids, and then started to sort of figure out how to bring that information to other folks and using our various skills and interest. And so what we've created is we have two courses. We have one called Homeschool the Redwoods Primary for 2 to 6, as for kids in that first plane of development. And then if you have an older child and you don't have access to a first, second, or third grade Montessori, but you'd still like to do that, we have created a course called Homeschool the Redwoods Lower Elementary. That's for ages 6 to 9. So the first half of the second plane. And they teach the foundations. There's videos. Aubrey does live lectures. We're going to be starting the next session for both primary, which is a 6-month program in August, and then it's a year-long program for lower elementary because it's a lot of curriculum, and we're going to start that in September as well. But when you sign up, you get, in addition to the 6 months of coaching and community, and the 12 months or 13 months actually of uh, coaching and community with the lower elementary, you actually get lifetime access to all the printable material. So all the lessons and the planning material. So it's really there. You're making an investment in the whole. And if you're looking for something that's a little bit more open and go practical, we have our constellation program. I just found this one here. It's an old, this one is bone. It's from last year, but this is a program we put together where we take the concepts that are covered in those ages 2 to 9 and have created all kinds of activities and
Oh,
lessons
nice.
for that, and it comes out every month. There's a different theme. It's designed for a family, so it's really for ages 2 to 9. And we give you advice on how to make it go up or down. There's always 10 new lessons. We're really trying to make it very DIY. You don't have to have materials. We provide everything that you would need to print, and we give you instructions on how to DIY anything else. And that also has community, so you can come in, you can join us, ask questions, hang out with other homeschooling folks from all over the world for both programs, and kind of work together. It's so much easier together, and I would love to see you there. And that's an ongoing enrollment. You can join anytime, and it's a whole year. It's a year at a time, but we would love to see some folks there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. Once again, we've popped all those links into the chat. So anybody that is listening or watching the replay, #replay, let us know where you're from. If you do have any questions offline, you're more than welcome to post those in the comments. Thanks everyone for joining us. We have an amazing discussion lined up for next month. So if you have just joined us for the first time on our events, please feel free, subscribe to our website so that you know what's upcoming. And we will definitely be looking forward to catching up with you guys again. Thanks, David, so much for joining us. Once again, everyone out there, take care. And please send our regards to Aubrey.
For sure.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.